He says the sign is clear. The words are small, printed, formal, tucked into a brass frame behind the reception desk, but his voice makes them larger than they are. It bounces off marble and glass and the cut crystal of the chandelier overhead. Bradley Stevens, the general manager, stands like a gatekeeper on a line drawn in the damask carpet, cufflinks pinching the sleeves of his blazer. He leans forward, palms flat on the reception counter, making space for his authority. The motion is meant to be invisible, and instead reads loudly across the room. Vanessa pauses a step beyond that invisible line. Her heels click once, twice, a measured metronome on polished stone. She has the kind of posture that commands the eye simply by refusing the easy downward arc of a shoulder. She wears a navy coat over a tailored dress, a small leather folder tucked under her arm. Her hair is pulled back with standards of neatness that could almost be mistaken for indifference if her face, if her eyes, didn't hold a current of careful attention. "Sorry, ma'am," Bradley says. "We require members to present identification. We have to follow club policy." His smile is an official instrument. It does what a policy never could. It brands a refusal as reasonable. Around them, lunch rush noise collects like an audience leaning forward. A woman at a nearby table lowers her magazine. Two men arguing about golf scores fall silent mid-sentence. A server carrying a tray of lemons freezes, tray slightly up, the lemons glimmering in motion. Even the receptionist looks up from her tablet with the soft expression of someone who has practiced neutrality. Vanessa sets the folder down on the counter. The leather encases a type of paper management never imagines at this counter. Spreadsheets, membership rosters, audit notes, a list of appointments. Her name is on a calendar for noon. She has an appointment to meet the club's new owner. She is, at this very moment, the lawyer who has spent the last decade taking on patterns like the one playing out in front of her. She is also, in a private life that Bradley has not been told, married to the man she's here to meet. That fact hangs unspoken like a low curtain behind her composed expression. It will later snap open in a way Bradley cannot currently foresee. But in this moment, all Bradley sees is the woman before him and the policy he holds like a shield. "It's on my schedule," Vanessa says. There is no loudness in her voice, no accusation infused. It is a sentence built to be precise and to leave no room for ambiguity. She pronounces each syllable like a step. She has been denied access like this before. The play is familiar. She recognizes the cadence of documentation and the pattern of scripted refusal. She can map the social choreography of it, the public humiliation, the hurried excuses, the distracted glance to avoid witnessing. "Membership card or a guest pass?" Bradley repeats.
He does not ask whether she has one. He states what is missing. He is not looking for a real answer. He is displaying the boundary. The room tightens. There is a mild shiver through the assembled bodies, staff and members who sense that an interaction has shifted from routine to performance. Eyes move in small arcs from the manager's chest to the guest's face and back again, as if they expect to see the invisible thread that validates the refusal. A young man at a corner table with a newspaper lifts a finger as if to point something out, but does not. He sips coffee instead. Up at the bar, James Foster, the food and beverage director, passes a plate to a bartender and then catches Vanessa's profile for a second. His expression is quick and ambiguous. Regret, recognition, a flicker of something like loyalty torn between policy and personhood. James knows the club's rhythms. He also knows the cost of stepping out of them. Vanessa's eyes sweep the room in the way of someone cataloging witnesses. She notes the receptionist, who will later be called to corroborate a version of events. She sees the camera tucked high in a corner, the silver dome no one bothers to mention. She files away the locations one by one like small evidence markers. Her mind, conditioned by years of litigation, moves quietly and efficiently through a checklist she has never needed to share aloud. People who will remember, surfaces that will show fingerprints, the exact angle from which someone might have photographed the exchange without being noticed. "I have a noon with Mr. Taylor," she says. The sentence is the softest possible escalation. She pronounces Taylor because she wants Bradley to register that there is a name attached to her presence. It is a polite disturbance calibrated to the room's sensibilities. Bradley straightens. There is a tiny flinch in the muscle near his jaw that Vanessa watches with the clinical steadiness of an expert seeing a familiar case unfold in real time. "If you can just provide ID, ma'am." "No," she answers, the words simple and even. "I don't need to provide ID to see the person I'm scheduled to see. He arranged this lunch. He expects me." The receptionist clicks, replies into the phone that she will check the calendar.
Bradley's posture is one of manual override. He can reroute this small act of hospitality into a demonstration of control, and he prefers to. Control is how managers like him survive scrutiny. It is how he preserves an atmosphere. It is how he reassures members that the club's rituals will remain uninterrupted. The denial stretches. A man at a nearby table murmurs to his companion. A mother slides a stroller back a few inches. The staff rehearsed its silence. Gossamer conversations thread through the room, an almost audible background of what now, and Vanessa finds the margin it creates for her own thought. She never raises her voice, but her eyes are sharp, they measure. She knows the weight of a look.
She knows how, in a room of well-practiced civility, moments of exclusion bloom into something that feels inevitable. She has spent years teaching organizations that nothing about bias announces itself loudly. Most of the time it lives in the small administrative choices, the form not accepted, the tone that suggests this is not your place, the policy applied selectively. She holds Bradley's gaze for a beat that feels intentionally too long for him. He glances away first, indicating he didn't like being studied. That flicker is a small victory. "Mr. Taylor sent no notice to our front desk," Bradley finally says. He reads from his prepared script. Absence of prior notice justifies refusal to admit. The script is safe. It returns him to policy rather than personality. Vanessa looks past him at the clerical computer, then to the wall calendar with a dozen post-its and pins. Her hand brushes the folder at her side. The leather is cool against her palm. The file inside contains more than a lunch meeting. It holds her plan, should she choose to enact it. She could make a scene. People would notice. Someone would yell about civility. Someone might call the club security to remove her. This is often how these exchanges are magnified and sanitized into a story of didn't follow the rules. But she is not here for spectacle. She is here because she has seen this pattern enough times to know that spectacle rarely changes systems. Data does. Witnesses do. A controlled exposure, not an eruption, will have a longer half-life. She breathes out. The sound is almost private. "Fine," she says. An unexpected concession. Her move is surgical. "I'll step into the cafe while you check with the owner." It is not a retreat. It is a decision to create space for evidence to form. Bradley looks relieved, as if the goal was simply to remove the problem. The room exhales with him. Conversations resume their previous rhythms. Servers bend to refill glasses. The chandelier throws light in bright, careless shapes across the scene, and the aroma of lemon and oil returns as if nothing had happened. Vanessa walks to a seating area that faces the reception desk but is far enough to feel apart. She sits in an upholstered chair with a view of the room, witnesses on one side, staff on the other. She takes out her phone and slides a screen up. Her fingers are deliberate. She opens a notepad and begins recording the interaction in concise lines, time-stamped. She knows that raw notes capture the tone of a moment in ways memory cannot. At the table nearest hers, a woman resettles her handbag and pretends to be reading. Her eyes, discreet, follow Vanessa with a mix of curiosity and the thin relief of someone relieved the spotlight isn't on her. A server passes. James, the F&B director, leans close to the bar and watches, jaw tight beneath a practiced smile. He knows the manager's rigidity. He knows the ways in which those who guard the gate mistake exclusion for safety.
He knows, too, that his name may be called later. Vanessa flicks on the voice recorder quietly, just to ensure she captures the ambient sound, the precise cadence of Bradley's refusal, the receptionist's tone, the clink of silverware. She writes down the names of the staff at the desk. She locates the security officer who stands by the elevators and mentally files him as someone whose presence could corroborate the timing of any escalation. She is methodical in a room that wants a fragmented, emotional story. Methodical is how she wins cases. Methodical is how systems are forced to confront themselves through the strangeness of evidence that sits on a lectern and refuses to be reduced to an anecdote. A server with a tray passes near her and drops a napkin. The cloth flutters down, settles, an ordinary small interruption in an imported calm. The instant the napkin hits the floor, a man in a tailored blazer bends and picks it up. The gesture is small, courteous, human. It creates a tiny fissure in the theater of exclusion. The room registers it like a humane reply to inhumanity. Later, the episode will be dissected for these small things: the napkin, the way a member chose to look, the angle from which a camera recorded Bradley's chin incline. In the moment, they are simply the quieted noise of a place that thinks itself immune to the world's larger conversations. A country club monopolizes leisure. It insists that leisure can be kept separate from political texture. Vanessa knows better. Institutions like this are microcosms that hold cultural logic, values rehearsed in menus, in membership forms, in the way front desks interpret policy.
She has done this long enough to know the rhythm of a good investigation. Gather witnesses, preserve the environment, document the initial refusal as fully as possible without letting passion make poor choices. She will need a paper trail. She will need people willing to speak without coercion. She will need to prove disproportionate enforcement of rules. She places the folder on the table and opens it like a quiet signal. Inside, a printed calendar entry for noon, a copy of the club's membership policy pulled from the public site, a short list of questions she intends to ask if she is allowed inside, a business card for her husband, William Taylor, leaning like an underused authority. The club's clock over the reception reads 11:54. Vanessa taps a new note into her phone. 11:45, denied access at front desk. Witnesses, Becky, reception, security guard, James F. Recording on phone. She adds, need email confirming owner's authorization if provided. From her position, she can see Bradley speak into his collar mic. The device looks small and efficient. Then she sees him gesture to a man in a navy suit who pads toward the desk with purpose. The man is a security guard, tall, respectful of formalities, with the blank expression of someone trained not to become a protagonist.
Bradley turns back to Vanessa and gives a practiced, final, managerly smile. If you can provide ID now, we can sort this. Vanessa opens her mouth to say something that will make the manager's posture look like what it is, an overstep, a selective reading of rules used to exclude. But she stops. She imagines the future version of this very scene in a hearing room, Bradley insisting he followed policy, staff shrugging, the club insisting it upheld standards. The only thing that will break that version is evidence that makes the narrative about disparity rather than singular decorum. Her head bows slightly, not in surrender, but in calculation. She reaches into the folder instead. Her fingers find a small folded note, an appointment card with William's name printed neat and black. She does not reach for the phone to escalate in the lobby. That would be an elevation of drama that, while satisfying in the moment, rarely produces the systemic outcome she wants. Instead, she stands up, collects the folder, and tells the receptionist she will step out for a moment to take a call. As she moves towards the entrance, she keeps her steps deliberately visible, still within the periphery of the staff in the room. People see her leave. They think the episode ended with her exit. They do not yet know that leaving is the first and intended move in a longer, controlled sequence. Outside, the air snaps against her face. The country club's courtyard has the smell of trimmed hedges and the faint petrol of passing cars. A gardener sweeps the path with the slow diligence of someone who takes pride in small loops of order. Vanessa pulls her phone to her ear and dials William. He answers on the first ring. "Which part of the club are you in?" he asks, voice mild. He knows her cadence. He knows the way she performs restraint as a tool. "In the lobby," she says. "Bradley is insisting on ID." There is the briefest silence, like a breath held in a room that knows an awkward phrase is on the floor. William's response is measured but sharp. "Tell me exactly what he says." Vanessa recounts, words tidy and factual. The call is not for a domestic escalation. It is not a marital confrontation. It is a request for a procedural solution. She explains the times and names. She mentions the security guard. She mentions James. She says plainly, "I'm not making a scene. I want documentation. I want an email confirming my authorization if you can provide it." She can hear him think. He asks a few logistical questions and then says, "I'll do it now. Send me what you have and I'll copy the front desk. We keep no secrets in our operations. No reason for this to become theater." Vanessa writes down the time of the call. She texts the calendar screenshot to William while they speak. She tells him she is staying visible, that she will continue to document. She doesn't tell him everything. No need to entangle him in the immediate choreography.
But she tells him enough. A name, a policy, a scribe. When she hangs up, she feels the small mechanical satisfaction, the way a chess player does after moving a piece into the beginning of a line she knows will be long. The plan is not yet audible to anyone in the club. For now, it is a half-turn that means a few things. The clock starts on a paper trail, a man in authority knows the refusal is being contested, and a higher-level authorization will be observable when it arrives. Vanessa returns to her seat as if she has simply resumed a waiting game. When she sits, she notices how many tiny movements resume around her, as if the scene wants to forget. A woman returns to her magazine. A man dips his head in conversation. James wipes a glass and then leans against the bar as if the moment were behind him. These are the theater of comfortable institutions. They long to swallow awkwardness in exchange for peace. She sets the phone on the table and continues to record. Her fingers move with the rhythm of a long practice. Shorthand notes, time marks, the occasional bracket indicating tone. This will not be a single voice slammed against a manager's ego. This will be a document. A documented refusal is a seed for structural change. An email ping arrives. His name lights on her screen. The sender ID is unfamiliar. She waits until it shows a preview, careful not to appear hurried. There is a line she recognizes, the sort of corporate authorizing language used when departments communicate. Please note, William Taylor will be present at the club today for a private lunch. It reads like an impartial fact, but the line will change the room when delivered to the right inbox. She doesn't open that email. For now, she wants the moment to breathe. Documentation matters not only for content, but for the cadence of revelation. The pause, the delay, the arrival that interrupts the scripted flow. She imagines Bradley reading the subject line, the way his mouth might tighten when a familiar certainty becomes uncertain. At the desk, the receptionist's fingers hover. That pause is a hinge. Vanessa watches the receptionist. She notices the receptionist's hesitation mirror 1,000 similar hesitations in workplaces where loyalty and fear meet. She notes this carefully. Later, when the story requires a human angle, it will be the receptionist's small acts, the choice to read an email aloud, the hesitation to call someone higher, that provide texture. 20 minutes pass. Vanessa remains, recording time, names, movement. Around her, the club returns to its low hum. She thinks of the many times she has sat across from clients whose dignity had been pared away by polite refusals, the slow erosion that left people explaining and apologizing for their own presence. She thinks of an elderly client who described exclusion as being taught to take up less space. That phrase sometimes echoes in her mind like a compass. Her phone buzzes again. This time the email is different.
The subject line reads, "Authorization, William Taylor, confirmed." She opens it with the same studied calm she has used to open thousands of files. The body is short. It references a guest authorization and indicates that any club staff should assist William's guests and associates. The author field shows a corporate administrative address. The timestamp is new. She allows herself one small internal smile. The email is a concrete artifact that will matter later, a piece of paper that speaks to process and power. In the theater of institutions, an email like this is an incandescent object. It cuts the shadow that managers use to hide in. She stands up and walks towards the front desk again, folder under her arm, the email poised to show. Bradley steps forward with the calm of a man accustomed to people bending. "We're all set to check ID now?" he asks. There is a rehearsed warmth to his voice, as if he has learned to heal the tiniest cracks in his authority with a practiced charm. Vanessa places the phone on the counter and turns it so Bradley can see the screen. She does not need to point. He reads the subject in a slow, almost lidded way, as if taking in the words physically for the first time. His gaze lifts, catches hers, and for the briefest fraction of a second, he looks like a man who understands that a miscalculation was made. "Looks like everything's in order," he says, trying to make the phrase resume the earlier posture of control. But something in his voice has changed. The muscles near his jaw are slack, the neatness of presumption disrupted. The room notices the displacement. Eyes flick. A napkin flutters. A camera dome tilts. James, who had considered stepping forward, allows himself a quick breath that reads like approval. Bradley's face composes back into its neutral script. He reaches for the phone on the reception counter to call someone, perhaps to confirm the authorization in other internal lines, perhaps out of the need to prove he was conscientious. He utters, "My apologies, ma'am. Please." The finish of the sentence hangs in the lobby like a small reconcilement. Vanessa steps past him without fanfare. Her movements are neither triumphal nor apologetic. She walks with the corporate inevitability that people on both sides of power sometimes mistake for arrogance. Inside, she will do what she came to do, an audit that is less about proving a single man's rudeness and more about revealing the practices that let it happen without consequence. As she walks through the club's corridors, she keeps picturing the lobby scene, the way Bradley tried to marshal policy into cultural enforcement, the drape of polite silence over a moment of exclusion, and she knows this will not be resolved by one email. Evidence, she thinks, amplifies what people are already capable of seeing. People notice what is made legible. She reaches the private dining room where William will meet her. The table is immaculately set. Place cards wait like cued soldiers. Light filters through curtains in a pattern that looks like stippled lace across menus. The room smells faintly of lemon and the wax of polished wood.
The transition from public lobby to private room is a strange domestic concession in a place designed to hide its social mechanics. The private room is where formalities and friendship meet. It is where the real power gestures are translated into agreements and routines. William rises when he sees her. He is a man of patient gestures, simple, deliberate. His hand comes forward first, not to claim, but to acknowledge. He uses his eyes to measure her, not to search for signs of indignation, but to gauge whether the plan they're about to enact is already in motion. "You're all right?" he asks quietly. "Fine," she says. The word is honest and measured. It contains no smaller elements of drama. She sits down and slides the folder across the table. The private room is closed in on itself. The shape of it will keep nothing from later scrutiny. The folder's documents will be read, and the patterns inside will refuse to be shrugged off as one-off. William scans the first page, and then the next. His face changes from polite curiosity to a more focused concern. He places a hand over one of the spreadsheets, columns of names, dates, and approval decisions that will in time tell a clear story if someone knows how to read them. "We need to look at this more carefully," he says, and the sentence has the leveled tone of someone who understands that institutions decide quickly whether they will repair or pretend. Outside, through the plate glass, the lobby continues. People move through it like a slow-hearted current. Those who were there when Vanessa was refused will carry the memory. Some will recall the manager's name in small private talk. Some will forget. But Vanessa knows these moments compound. 1,000 small exclusions create cultures that accept certain faces and dismiss others as not belonging. She and William speak quietly for a long while, about the audit, about who should be notified, about the optics and the facts. He asks for a list of names she will need to interview. She suggests a sequence: front desk staff first, James next, then a few members whose involvement in membership committees might reveal whether there were cultural gatekeepers at work. She points out the simple but telling anomalies in the membership logs: handwritten notes and margins, consistent denials to applicants from certain zip codes, a strange pattern in the requests logged as atmosphere concerns. William listens and nods. He asks for numbers: what is quantifiable, what can be shown in a chart. Vanessa offers to prepare a statistical visualization of approval rates by demographic markers. He accepts, and together they map out the first steps. The plan is to do this carefully. Vanessa will not confront Bradley the way tabloids might want. She will gather, verify, and then present.
She wants a record to stand up to institutional defense. She wants to remove the possibility of "it's just him" or "just a misunderstanding." She wants the system to be what is examined, not merely the man with the cufflinks. Before they rise, William presses his hand to the folder, as if to ground it. He is aware of the stakes: the club's reputation, membership stability, the slow erosion of trust that a scandal could provoke. But he is also aware that the right move is not to soothe or silence, it's to make the institution transparent. They leave the private room together, and the world of the club reframes itself around the idea of a meeting that was scheduled and then, in the lobby, almost prevented. People notice the couple walking back through the dining room, two bodies existing in a space that has now been marked by a small but meaningful disruption. Conversations shift a notch. The server who had hovered earlier offers a nod that reads like deference now, not discomfort. Bradley is at the desk. He rises as they approach, with a smile that is quick and trained. It is an offering that reads like efficiency, not remorse. The front desk has been told the authorization is valid. The immediate barrier is passed, but the deeper work is only beginning. Vanessa wants procedures changed. She wants transparency. She wants training so that future refusals are rare and accountable, not hidden in polite paperwork. She wants patterns to be visible, because visibility is a necessary precondition to repair. She will have to convince more than William. She will have to build a record and a language insurance that will achieve reform rather than mere discipline of one man. This is not just about Bradley's mistake in the lobby. It is about the way a club's unwritten rules can become the mechanics of exclusion, about the ease with which service policies can serve as veneers for bias. But in this first moment, in the immediate hours after being refused, she has chosen to do the work that turns indignation into a procedural instrument. She knows the move will unsettle some people. She knows it will require patience. She knows it will demand that she remain composed when others try to make it personal. Before they leave the club, Vanessa pauses at the reception again and thanks the receptionist for her time. The woman smiles, an up and down motion that tries to be casual and ends up being truer. Vanessa leaves her with a business card and a soft, "If they ask for your recollection later, please tell the truth."
It is a small, gentle nudge. The receptionist's fingers curl around the card, and for a beat the room holds its breath, as if someone has reminded it that truth still matters in certain practical ways. Outside, Vanessa walks to her car. The sun is low now, making the hedges glow like a border of gold. She slides behind the wheel and does not start the engine immediately.
She pulls out the folder and opens the first spreadsheet to recheck the figures she and William sketched. She makes a notation. Front desk, ask for log of guest pass denials. Cross-check with membership committee emails. Interview James. Then she picks up the phone and dials a different number, herself, as if to call in the stead of another life. She records a quick message to capture the emotion that might be used in court someday, or in a boardroom, or in the press. She speaks not to inflame, but to document, crisp and factual. 11:45 a.m., denied access at front desk despite authorization pending. Witnesses, Becky R., James F., security guard J. Email authorization confirmed at 12:12 p.m. The words are measured in her mouth, deposited like secure stones into a river of eventual testimony. She sits back and breathes. The engine is off, the world around her impatient and unaware. In that space, she draws a map of the next steps. Interviews, data pulls, timelines. She imagines Bradley's next reaction, if he is the sort to deflect, to blame training, to name policy as armor. She prepares for that possibility. She prepares also for the possibility that others will step forward to tell stories they've shelved as private grievances. This is a beginning, she knows. The denial in the lobby is one moment among many that reveal how cultures of an institution are created and maintained. It is raw and public in style, but without a plan it would dissipate like steam. With a plan, it becomes an inflection point. She puts the phone down and starts the engine. The first move, leaving calmly, documenting, has been completed. The second move, assembling an audit and a strategy, awaits. She pulls out of the lot and the club slips behind her like a theater stage curtain folding back onto itself. The narrative is no longer about the chill of refusal in a lobby. It is about the work that might force that club to change the script. If you want more investigations like this, subscribe. Vanessa moves through the club now as someone who belongs both inside its private rooms and to the public procedures that will hold it accountable. The first full phase of the audit begins in the quiet of a back office, a small room with a single window and a printer that hums like a patient machine. She sets the folder down, opens her laptop, and begins to make the high-resolution version of what the lobby moment implied, patterns. The membership roster she requests arrives on a flash drive from the front desk. It is a flat file at first, names, dates, zip codes, notes. But when she sorts it and layers it against application outcomes, a picture emerges that is no longer anecdotal. There are columns of approvals and denials. There are marginal notes that recur across officers, abbreviations in the handwriting of someone who checks boxes quickly. A phrase appears several times, shorthand scrawled in ink, atmosphere concerns.
Vanessa pins that phrase in her mind like a testable hypothesis. She begins with the numbers because numbers make invisible practices visible. She runs approval rates by neighborhood, by application source, by committee reviewer. In raw percentages, something that might have been dismissed as one-off discretion begins to look like a structural shape. Certain neighborhoods show far lower acceptance rates. Certain reviewers have disproportionate denial rates. The denials cluster around particular language, handwritten notes that do not appear in approvals. Not in keeping, not our culture, recommended reconsideration. Vanessa photographs the pages with a steady hand, annotates the screenshots, and creates a timeline of denials that mirrors the pattern she suspected. Each photograph becomes an evidentiary tile. When she overlays the times of denials with staff schedules, a pattern aligns with Bradley's shifts and occasional comments from front desk clerks. The spreadsheet begins to read like testimony. She interviews staff in a sequence she has practiced many times. She starts with the receptionist, Becky, who is uneasy at first, then more candid when she sees Vanessa's methodical temperament. Becky explains the routines: guest passes first, card checks, quiet calls to clear an unexpected arrival. She mentions that sometimes a member will call to say, so-and-so wouldn't be the right fit, and those notes would get attached to an application folder. The language of fit is murky and pliable. It can mean anything and thereby mean nothing. In policy, a dead end for accountability. James is next. He takes a long time to answer at first, watching the pattern of Vanessa's questions as if measuring risk as well as truth. He remembers specific incidents that now look like pieces of the larger pattern. An applicant turned away because a committee member had once commented that their accent didn't fit the room. A teenager rejected from a scholarship program because a manager felt the club had to preserve its atmosphere. James's testimony is halting but honest. He describes a culture where preserving comfort routinely trumped clear, documented criteria. When Vanessa asks about atmosphere concerns, James's face tightens. He uses a quiet, almost apologetic tone. We were told to look out for overall club environment. It was never defined.
He produces, from a folder of his own, a few training memos that read like advice more than rules. Preserve members' expectation of familiarity, maintain exceptional experiences. The memos are thin on objective standards and heavy on discretionary language. Discretion, in institutions, becomes a mechanism of gatekeeping. Vanessa keeps the interviews factual and brief. She asks for examples, dates, names. She records the interviews with permission and makes sure the staff understand the audit purpose is not punitive but corrective.
That stance matters. People who have followed instructions rarely see themselves as villains. They see themselves as caretakers of a system. Vanessa wants them to see how their caretaking created boundaries that were never spelled out but enforced all the same. Several members are also willing to speak. One of them recalls a committee meeting where a candidate's name was quietly set aside after a member expressed worries about suitable acquaintances. Another tells an awkward story about a family who was told their application was paused while a committee looked into certain issues. The stories cluster around soft judgments translated into hard outcomes. Vanessa compiles this into a report for William and a suggested rollout plan. They decide to notify the board and to convene, quietly, a committee to review the initial findings. William is pragmatic but firm. The point is not to shame a staff member into leaving, but to build systems that make such exclusions impossible. The board meeting is scheduled for within 48 hours. Word travels in the club like a subtle current. Bradley hears rumors and answers them with the vocabulary he knows: policy, procedure, responsibility. Thomas Blackwell, the regional director, is less inclined to see patterns. He arrives at the club believing in the efficiencies of established practice. Managers must apply rules consistently, he tells Vanessa at one exchange. If you undermine that, you undermine service. Vanessa listens carefully to the wording. Consistency, he argues, is crucial. She notes that consistency in exclusion is still exclusion. The first public friction occurs at a staff meeting convened by William to present the need for an audit. Bradley attends with a neutral smile and an air that reads like formality. He gives a prepared statement about following procedures and being committed to fairness. He speaks of training refreshers and reviewing acceptance criteria. His tone is meant to reassure. But the report Vanessa has prepared, spreadsheet printouts, annotated emails, photographed application margins, sits on the conference table like a second language Bradley wasn't taught to read. When Vanessa walks the board through the data, the mood in the room shifts. The statistics are simple and hard. Applications from particular communities are denied at a far higher rate than other applicants with similar credentials. The notes accompanying denials are qualitatively different from those on approvals. A few members of the board who have known the club for decades, who prided themselves on stewardship of a social institution, sit in silence as their assumptions are interrogated by evidence. Some visibly shift in their seats. There is a moment, small but decisive, when a board member named Patricia Alvarez leans forward and asks for the raw data files.
She asks not for headlines, but for methods. How was the data set compiled? What controls were used? Could the pattern be explained by other factors? Vanessa answers each question patiently and in detail. The board member's posture changes from curiosity to concern. A careful person, Patricia reads institutional risk and opportunity the way an investor reads balance sheets. When Vanessa explains the atmosphere shorthand and points to multiple instances where it correlated with denial, Patricia's gaze hardens with the beginnings of resolve. She says, "We need transparency and accountability. We need to stop relying on cues that are effectively invisible." Bradley, sensing the room shift away from him, tries to redirect the conversation toward individual discretion and training. He frames the problem as one of lapses rather than patterns. He offers to stand aside while training programs are refreshed. His statement is familiar, an offer of personal correction rather than structural change. Vanessa presses back with the documents, the timestamps, the handwriting, the overlapping denial windows. She contrasts the club's publicly stated membership criteria with the discretionary notes. The contrast is stark. The board decides, by a narrow vote, to place Bradley and a senior administrator on paid administrative leave pending a full independent review. It is not a punishment. It is a procedural step meant to ensure the audit is conducted without internal interference. Bradley's face tightens. For the first time since the lobby denial, his composure looks fragile. He packs a small satchel and leaves, more hurried than the club's rituals usually allow. In the lobby, he meets members who watch with curiosity. A few exchange awkward apologies in passing. The shock in the club is not just that a manager has been suspended. It is the social realization that a private place's choices have public consequences.
The investigation that follows is formal and wide-ranging. An independent third-party firm is engaged to run a forensic review. Vanessa participates as a subject expert and a witness. They pull emails, membership files, committee minutes, and member feedback forms. They cross-check denials against committee rosters. They interview staff and members. They photograph application folders and scan handwritten notes. The independent reviewers create an audit trail that is airtight: hard documents, reproducible methods, and detailed interviews. During this period, Bradley attempts a public defense. He gives an interview to a local outlet and frames himself as a manager who followed policy, who was surprised by the action, and who will cooperate. He insists there was no racial animus, that any denial was based on professional judgment. His words are measured, but when Vanessa watches the clip, she does not see an argument. She sees the atmosphere of a man who expected the drama of a lobby denial to remain private and unexamined. It no longer can.
The independent firm's initial report is decisive. They find that while the club's written policies were broad, in practice, staff applied unwritten standards that disproportionately impacted applicants from certain communities and neighborhoods. The phrase "atmosphere concerns" had been used repeatedly, often as a shorthand for "not in our social circle." The report recommends specific corrective steps: rewriting application criteria to remove vague discretion, mandatory training on bias and inclusion, the creation of an independent appeals process for denied applicants, and a public oversight committee that includes outside members. At a board meeting made public, William stands beside Vanessa and reads a statement. He speaks directly to the club and to the community. He apologizes for the club's failure to live up to its professed values and commits to the proposed reforms. He announces the administrative leave for Bradley and at least one other manager pending further review. He names Patricia Alvarez as the leader of a new inclusion oversight committee tasked with implementing the audit's recommendations. The room shifts in ways that cannot be undone. Names are attached to consequences. Systems are now required to change. Bradley's initial reaction is to push back. He challenges the report's interpretation and asks for arbitration. The club's legal counsel anticipates that personnel disputes and claims of unfair treatment could end up in an arbitration forum where both sides can present evidence before a neutral arbitrator. The board agrees that arbitration is an appropriate venue to adjudicate employment disputes. Vanessa prepares for that phase with the same care she used in the lobby: organize the facts, prepare witnesses, anticipate defense narratives. Arbitration is impersonal and efficient, a room where the drama of a lobby is distilled into exhibits, sworn testimony, and cross-examination. Vanessa does not play a starring role in the arbitration. She is a presenter of evidence and a witness. Her testimony is crisp. She explains the audit methods, points to the spreadsheet visualizations, and reads aloud the handwritten atmosphere notes that were inconsistently applied. She calls James to the stand, not as a caricatured hero, but as a staff member who saw practices developed and who is willing to speak about them. James's testimony is the hinge. He explains what he watched: a pattern of reflexive denials, the circulation of fit conversations in hallways, the lack of clear criteria. When Vanessa asks whether he ever heard explicit racial language used to describe applicants, James answers carefully. No, not explicit, but the ways we were taught to describe people, keeps our feel, not in keeping with club culture, meant certain people were never seen as possibilities. His words are plain, but damning in their implication. Exclusion need not be shouted to have the power of a club's rules.
Bradley's defense is to replay policy and to deny intentional bias. He testifies that he enforced the rules and that any patterns are coincidental. But Vanessa has prepared charts that show statistical disparities and timelines that correlate denials with particular reviewers. She lays out a sequence of denials, each accompanied by similar handwritten notes and with a pattern of clustering around the same internal language. The arbitrator, trained to weigh evidence, finds that while there was no proof of explicit racial animus, the practices were discriminatory in effect, and the club's governance failed to prevent them. The arbitration outcome is measured. It does not criminalize individuals. Rather, it upholds corrective administrative actions. Bradley's continued employment is reconsidered under strict conditions, including mandatory retraining and probationary oversight. 2 managers are terminated for failure to follow clearly established policy when it mattered. The club agrees to implement the independent recommendations in a public timeline. The press conference that follows is controlled and sober. William stands at a lectern, flanked by Patricia and Vanessa. Vanessa speaks only briefly. She describes the process, supports the reforms, and underscores that accountability is about systems, not spectacle. Reporters press for reaction from Bradley. His public statements are quiet and defensive. He emphasizes that he never intended harm and that he regrets the effect of his decisions. The narrative in the media becomes less about personal scandal and more about institutional failure and recovery. The story resonates beyond the club. Other private institutions, clubs, associations, hospitality venues, see the headlines and initiate their own reviews. Industry groups publish statements about inclusion and transparency. A small coalition of clubs reaches out to Vanessa and William, asking how they can adopt the audit protocols the club used. Vanessa, who had never intended to be a public figure, finds herself consulted by a consortium developing an inclusion certification for private clubs, an external audit and seal that signals transparent application processes, oversight, and demonstrated commitment to equitable membership. Community activists and legal scholars take notice. Some praise the methodical approach taken by Vanessa as a model for how to confront structural bias in private institutions. Others warn of the limits of reforms without sustained oversight. Vanessa listens to both, aware that systemic change is not a single victory but a long campaign. The club's decision to publish the independent audit and to accept an external certification process is a meaningful step, but she knows the work will require vigilance. Bradley attempts, privately and publicly, to shape a comeback narrative. He writes op-eds that frame the dispute as a misunderstanding, cites his long service, and seeks to reposition himself.
The board and membership's response is mixed. Some members push for forgiveness and restoration, others for stricter accountability. The club ultimately decides to make further personnel changes and to require that anyone in a senior gatekeeping role complete a new set of evaluations and external training before returning to a position of authority. A year later, the club publishes a progress report. The tone is less triumphant than careful. The report lists policy changes, a reworked application process with explicit criteria, an appeals board that includes community representatives, mandatory bias training for staff and volunteer committee members, and the creation of a scholarship and mentorship program that aims to diversify membership pipelines. The metrics in that report are modest but real. Acceptance patterns by neighborhood have shifted. Previously underrepresented communities have seen a noticeable increase in approved applications. The club's membership renewal rates remain steady, and on several quarters, revenue tied to membership pools increased as the club attracted new families and younger members. The independent certification, now a small but emerging standard, shows that the club met the criteria for transparency and inclusivity in its membership process. 10 other clubs in the region begin the certification process in the months that follow. On the club terrace, 6 months after the reforms, Vanessa watches a different kind of scene unfold. A local college's hospitality program hosts a diversity in the service sector luncheon. Students from a range of backgrounds fill the long table, and several scholarship recipients, young people who may one day be members, share stories. Vanessa, seated at the head with William nearby, listens as a young woman describes having once hesitated to apply anywhere that felt not for people like me. She laughs now at the memory of how serious she was then. The terrace is fuller and brighter. Conversations are from a wider range of life experience. James stands a little apart from the main table, a tray balanced with the ease of someone who knows the rhythms of service. His expression is steady. He has been recognized in internal communications for his willingness to be candid during the audit, and he now participates in staff training as a peer mentor. The work was not easy for him. At times he had to explain uncomfortable truths to the people he served. He has found, though, that the club is no poorer for honesty, and that many members appreciate the chance to be part of a space that reflects an ethic of inclusion. Patricia Alvarez leads a new committee that fields appeals, recommends training, and ensures quarterly reporting to the membership. She introduces a mentorship program that pairs long-standing members with applicant families to help the process of integration, not as a gatekeeping practice, but as a welcoming mechanism. Her leadership is practical and exact. She writes emails that translate policy into daily practice and insists on transparent metrics in every board meeting. Vanessa, ever the strategist, continues to push for external oversight and a public registry of certified clubs. She speaks at industry gatherings now, describing the sequence of the lobby denial as a case study in how institutions can become unintentionally exclusionary. She emphasizes the importance of documentation, evidentiary rigor, and the humility to accept independent review. In her speeches, she speaks less in the courtroom cadence of argument and more in the pragmatic tone of someone offering a recipe for repair. There are failures along the way. Not every policy change is implemented perfectly. A committee member forgets to disclose a conflict of interest, a staff schedule fails to reflect equitable oversight, and a misunderstanding recurs. But the club's mechanisms now include a cycle of adjustment. When something fails, an audit follows, and the record is revised. That iterative process becomes part of the club's culture. Bradley fades from the public eye. He leaves the club and takes a different position elsewhere, one with less direct membership authority. He gives an exit interview that is spare and contains equal parts regret and rationalization. The last public glimpse of him is in an industry newsletter announcing his departure, framed as a personnel change. Vanessa will not pursue him.
Her aim was never to destroy an individual so much as to build a place where exclusion could not hide behind polite phrases. The larger industry begins to change its language. Atmosphere concerns becomes a phrase challenged in meeting rooms. Committees adopt clearer rubrics, measurable criteria tied to sponsorship, community engagement, and demonstrated alignment with the institution's mission. Boards insist on periodic third-party reviews. A small but growing movement pushes for shared best practices and a certification that rewards clubs with external verification of equitable processes. At a public conference on hospitality and inclusion, Vanessa stands before an audience of industry leaders and young professionals. She tells the story in precise terms: the moment in the lobby, the decision to document rather than perform, the audit that revealed patterns, and the board's willingness to act. She talks about strategy over spectacle and the importance of aligning power with accountability. She does not claim victory, she calls for vigilance. After the talk, a student approaches her with a question. What should we focus on first? Vanessa smiles. Start with clarity, she says. Define your criteria in a way that can be tested. Build reporting channels, invite oversight, and be willing to change when the evidence shows you a different truth than the story you've always told yourself. In quieter moments, Vanessa reflects on what the lobby denial taught her about visibility.
The humiliation she experienced that day could have been a private wound, a personal indignity to endure. Instead, it became a public lever for change. She thinks of the receptionist who kept the card, of James who risked candor, of Patricia who insisted on accountability. She thinks of William, who chose not to paper over the problem, but to make it public and fixable. The epilogue is not a scene of perfect reconciliation. It is a mosaic of small reforms and visible consequences, a scholarship that brings families previously excluded into club life, a mentorship program that eases the social navigation of new members, a certification crest that sits beside a club's name on promotional materials. Modest but positive shifts in membership makeup and revenue patterns that suggest inclusivity and sustainability can coexist. It is a year marked by steady work rather than by a single dramatic purge. On an ordinary afternoon, Vanessa walks through the lobby she once left, under the cool discipline of strategy. Children from different backgrounds play at a corner table. A member leans in to ask about a recent community event. Staff move efficiently, now trained to see bias in small habits. Bradley's picture in the system is a closed file. The club's processes have been altered so that front desk discretion is limited by clear checks and transparent appeals. Vanessa pauses at the reception desk, not to make a point, but to notice. Becky, the receptionist, looks up and meets her eye. There is a brief, private moment of recognition. Becky smiles and says, "The training helped. It made some things easier." It is an ordinary sentence that carries the weight of work done right. Vanessa thinks about the strange arc of being misread and then made legible. There is a private irony in how the revelation of her relationship to the owner, what many would call the shock, forced the club to confront its assumptions publicly. Yet the larger victory is not the moment the room gasped or the manager's miscalculation. It is the slow, methodical building of systems that make those miscalculations far less likely to occur. She steps outside into the club's courtyard, the same hedges she walked past months before, now trimmed as if to frame a different world. She breathes in the air that smells of cut grass and lemon oil, and thinks not of triumph but of responsibility. The narrative that began with denial has expanded into remediation, education, and a modest change in who is seen and who can belong. Later, when she speaks about the club's journey, she does not celebrate a single headline. She cites the spreadsheets, the audit steps, the independent review, and the governance changes. She emphasizes that accountability is boring in its best moments. Consistent reporting, regular checks, clear appeals. Those are the mechanisms that keep a culture honest. Her last public remarks at an industry forum end with a quiet conviction. She says simply, "Being seen is a right, not a favor. Institutions must be built so that belonging is defined by shared standards, not by invisible preferences. If we do that work, more doors will open, and it won't be a matter of surprise when someone walks through who challenges what we thought we knew." The camera, in a final shot, lingers on the terrace as the sun sets. Members of different backgrounds, young families, a mix of laughter and soft music. The club's chandeliers throw light across faces that a year earlier might have been kept waiting. It is not the end of struggle, it is evidence of sustained change. systems that now require transparency, a board that answers to standards, staff who are trained to welcome rather than gatekeep. Vanessa stands at a small table with a scholarship recipient and a student from the mentorship program. She listens as they speak about plans and possibilities. The conversation is ordinary and profound. In her mind, she files it as a victory of process over spectacle. If this story moved you, share it with someone who believes accountability matters. Tell the story of how one methodical response turned a moment of exclusion into a pathway for institutional reform.